Hello, welcome to the OLM Feature Planning / Issue Triage meeting. Today is February 4th. On the agenda today, we have GitHub issue triage and one additional issue from Chris on the initializer CLI. So why don't we get started with the second item from Chris on deprecating the initializer CLI. Chris, are you on the call? Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
Let's start with
Yeah,
that.
so I just, we just, the initializer, as I think everybody knows, is basically a tool to build a catalog from a directory of bundles. And so the output of that is a catalog that does not reference bundle images. And so a lot of the tooling, and Kevin Rizza actually just started responding to my thread in Slack there. A lot of the future kinds of things are going to be depending on the bundles existing. And I think even Red Hat's own operator certification and publishing mechanism for its catalog requires that. So I'm wondering if we should recategorize or at least describe what the purpose of the initializer is, because I think it might, even though it's supposed to work, I think there are use cases where it might not work in the future. So is it really designed as a developer tool? Because internally within IBM here too, we've got, because it was kind of rolled out at the beginning and then bundle images came out later, and we still have some legacy products or modern products that are still using the legacy way. And so it doesn't work with our tooling. So people kind of get down that wrong path, I think.
Yeah, so I can repeat what I was just starting to type in that Slack thread, but the initializer exists exactly for what you described. Historically, it was the way to build catalog. Well, the way to build the database from a directory of manifests. Pretty much from the moment we started building out the replacement for catalog images with the index image and bundles and all that stuff, we sort of stopped focusing on delivering any kind of new tools or functionality around the initializer or really any of the binaries that are built from the operator registry project that aren't OPM. So they're still there because there was sort of this long form migration for most folks off of those tools and onto OPM and the index image, and we haven't removed them from the repository or anything like that yet. But I think that it's probably fair for us to start looking at what removing those entirely looks like, because we don't, as far as I know, there's nobody in the community who is spending time trying to improve those tools or even add any of the features that we're adding to bundle images onto the initializer. So
yeah, could we just at least in the README, and I'm willing to do the PR for this, could we put the word deprecated next to the initializer and the operator registry? Because really OPM should be the one and only tool for all of that right now. That's my opinion based on what you just said.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay, awesome. Because I just needed some ammo to make sure I could illustrate, because this has been my gut for a while, but I just wanted to get, all right, I'm good. I'll submit a PR for that.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. So next up, we don't have anything. Oh, we have something new from John. Question on what is the cadence for upstream to downstream? That's a great question. I can speak to this a little bit in that we have a doc floating around that Kevin put together, and we've been discussing that very question. I don't think we've come to a resolution yet. I'm just pulling up the doc here. So there's this open PR that I'll put in the chat that talks about sort of the upstream governance model and how we want to sync between upstream and downstream. So that's the start. Maybe Kevin, you want to speak a little bit more to this question?
So I think that the PR you just linked is more about the upstream cadence. And I think that is a little bit separate from, if we're talking about downstream, talking about going down to OpenShift. So the high level, I think it's important to keep in mind that downstream OpenShift is not a specific release of upstream OLM pulled down. There's actually an entirely different process by which the OpenShift product pulls in latest bits from the OLM project down into its own private repository. So I wouldn't ever try to like look at what's in an upstream release and then try to figure out, oh, well, what does that mean for downstream OCP? In terms of like, so I think it's important, if everyone's not already really aware of it, there's been a bunch of work and process gone into trying to make this a lot more explicit. So one of the first things that's probably happening sometime next week is we are actually divorcing OCP and OpenShift from the upstream operator framework repositories. So right now they're both sort of built from the same source. Like if you go take a look at the operator lifecycle manager repository, for example, you'll see a bunch of branches, which are basically labeled like release-4.6 or release-4.5. And those explicitly point to downstream OpenShift release paths that get pulled down explicitly for OpenShift ZStream releases. All that stuff is going to stop happening eventually, probably not immediately, but and the other thing to keep in mind is we have this problem, and the reason we're doing it more than anything else is the downstream product has certain requirements on open source repositories that are actually providing source directly, where there's certain rules, like they have a code freeze, and then you can't actually merge anything unless you have special bits and permissions associated with merging. So all that stuff is getting taken away and put into a separate open source repository in the OpenShift org. And then all of that automation will get removed from our upstream repository, and we'll just be left with just the upstream project. And once that happens, I think there's going to be a much more clear separation of upstream to downstream that you'll see, because I think in the short term, we'll still have some sort of like mirroring process that happens once a day or whatever that pulls upstream source to downstream, but you should be able to see those commits explicitly in the downstream OpenShift repository. And the upstream is no longer going to be under the restrictions that an OpenShift repository has. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's kind of like what the current state of the project is. And hopefully once that all happens, we should be able to start building a lot more explicit processes just for the upstream project so that the release cadence becomes a little bit better. And that's kind of what that pull request that Dan posted in the chat is about.
Okay, yeah, that helps. Because part of my question was that it was related to one of the PRs that I created, and I think Kevin, maybe you replied to that, asking about, because I was asking about what is the process? Why it seemed like this PR might be stuck, and it wasn't really clear about the whole process of actually doing a freeze, and so having the context for this helps. The question I have is that, so when you do actually create a downstream repository, you're saying that that's still basically open source. It's just that it's under OpenShift's guidelines and direction, so to speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think basically the downstream will look a lot more similar. Basically, what we have now is essentially sort of what the downstream will be to some degree, and the upstream will be not subject to the same restrictions around like merge windows, and we can have a different set of CI running, and it'll be, I think the whole point is to make it easier for external contributors to merge things into the upstream. versus the downstream. So
Okay, yeah, I guess it was just, the question was just like, the openness is still there. I mean, if I need to go look at a downstream repo, I can still do that because it's actually public and it's something, so you can actually see what is in the upstream versions versus what's in the downstream version, and you can actually look at those repos and see what the differences are and that sort of thing.
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. So I just posted a link in the chat as well, which points to the repository that will contain all the downstream bits. Right now, it's basically empty just because we haven't done that cutover yet. But as soon as that happens, you should see just downstream OpenShift bits that'll tell you like, hey, here's exactly what's in downstream OpenShift, and that's separate from what's in the upstream repository.
Okay, great, that's helpful. That's exactly the kind of information I was looking for, just to get a better understanding of the process. Thank you.
yep, no problem. I guess maybe it's worth mentioning while we're on the topic of the downstream repository will look quite a bit different in the sense that if you look at the enhancement, it's actually more of a monorepo of several repos put together. So that's something to be aware of. But yeah, hopefully that will happen, as we said, next week or in the coming weeks. Okay, so looks like that was the last formal item on the agenda. So what we wanted to do is to spend some time going over some of the open GitHub issues and seeing if we can make progress on triaging them while we're here. So I'm going to share my screen. And I guess first I would like to ask, is there anyone on the call who has a specific issue that they would like to bring up while we're here? If so, we'll look at that first. Otherwise, we'll just kind of go down from the top.
So we're going to do the operator registry as well.
We can do the operator registry if there's a specific issue in operator registry that you'd like to address. But we can definitely do that. I mean, the issues all kind of they all kind of lead to the same thing. So
I mean, I've got lots of issues I'm interested in.
yeah.
And they're all sorts of different things, from like their feature things, bugs, diagnostic things. They're very large, very small. You know, I've got a whole bunch of stuff, and I guess I'm leery of bringing anything up because that'll tank the entire meeting. So if you'd rather go through things and actually triage things and actually put labels on them and stuff, maybe that's more appropriate to what you want to do.
Well, I think the goal is to ultimately find the issues that are affecting the members of the community, because right now basically we have a pretty big backlog of issues, and we're not triaging them enough. I want to point attention to this new gold triage label that we have, which is basically a bug label that is indicating that the issue has been sort of considered and someone has responded to it. I think we're working on some processes internally as well to help formalize how we're going to triage our issues. What I'm trying to say is that I think it's best if you're here and you're interested in a particular issue that you feel is affecting, your team, then I'd be happy to do that one first. If there's anything specific that you like, it's okay if it takes up time, because the ultimate goal is to basically narrow down the list of issues to the issues that are important to the community and discard those that aren't really going anywhere. So if there are any actionable issues or issues that you're looking for like a response from members of the OLM team, then we should definitely prioritize those while we're here.
Yeah, I guess the one of them that jumps out at me in this repo is 483. So if I actually just search for skip patch, Semver skip patch, you'll probably find it.
453.
The channel switching one.
Okay.
The middle one. The middle
This
one.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
431. Okay.
So this might have been resolved by all of the list bundle fixes, and haven't validated this yet. So I just want to, so the problem I ran into was we really, really want to use Semver skip patch, because I think it models our entire channel taxonomy design, where we use major, minor channels. And this was preventing me from actually switching channels. And at the bottom, it was said, oh yeah, we didn't think about channels when we did Semver skip patch. However, I am seeing now some skip and skip range entries showing up inside the responses, and I think it's supposed to work now. I guess I guess I'd like some feedback on whether channel switching is planning on working with Semver skip patch. Does this ring a bell to anybody?
So I vaguely remember talking about this a while ago, where we definitely made some fixes to the list bundles API and the gRPC binary.
Yep.
That basically looked at the channel entry table and then attempted to model skips and replaces and skip range such that you would get the channel, you would get basically a list bundles that the resolver on cluster should understand, but that graph was built by Semver skip patch mode. I believe that exists and should work. Maybe I need some more context. How does that relate to switching channels?
So when you're using Semver skip patch, it simulates. So the problem is if you don't use, in our world, we're using major.minor channels, okay? And so in order to facilitate switching from like a 1.0 to a 1.1 channel, you have to use skip range, because each channel has its own stream. So you can't use replaces between channels, because otherwise you're going to end up replacing the heads, across channels, and so that doesn't work. So we use skip range to allow you to flip. Like if you look at the bottom table there, we see, the 1.1.0 version skips 1.1. Actually, it's less than 1.1.0 is what it should be. So you can flip from 1.0
okay.
anything to 1.1.
Yeah, I think, I don't know that there is a trivial way for skip patch mode to model what you're describing, because trying to think about this. How would this work? So I see. So basically what you want to do is you want to, for your 1.1 channel, you want like either the first entry in that channel or the latest entry in that channel to skip over everything, including the 1.0 channel. I don't know. I see. So basically what we would need to have is something like, in addition to a path that with the set of skips for everything up to the latest thing in that channel, you'd also need an edge or a set of edges for all the things in the version below that. I don't know. It seems reasonable to me for us to do something like add one more edge, which is the latest thing in the previous channel. I don't know that like there would be a default mode to skip patch mode that would also include edges from everything below it. That seems like it's kind of counter to what Semver mode was intended for. If that makes sense. Like, I guess to me, and this is sort of like high level, why does Semver mode exist? What was its purpose? It was never intended to completely replace all the controls that you get with replaces mode. It was intended to be something where if you just have like a very limited set of rules, you have a stable channel and you just want to define specific upgrades in that stable channel, go use Semver mode. I think that it's going to be challenging for us to try to model every sort of channel graph type in Semver mode. And I don't know. I mean, if you have like a really smart idea here, I'm not opposed to like looking at the proposal and trying to see where it would fit. I'm concerned about adding a bunch of complexity to Semver mode, and then like because the goal of the mode was basically like I don't really care about my graph. I just have one thing. I just want to be able to stream updates.
Yeah, let me just see, December. Just trying to remember. So Ben Luddy and I have been working on. I've been trying to diagnose the latest. Oh, where the heck is it? I can't find anything. Yeah, 483. I want to say that I thought I saw it show up. All right, let's table this for the time being. Let me do some more testing and see what that is. But so the reason, so what we're trying to do is now that we've got all these products out the going out the door, now we're getting into the mode where we need to start deprecating stuff, right? And we're getting the mode where we don't want to support every single combination of every single version. So we've kind of got this happy path of things that work together. And then we do have multiple streams now. Now that there's an extended update service release of OpenShift, now we're going to have a continuous delivery release for most products and then a EUS release. And so we need to compartmentalize the different channels. And so we're going to have different streams. And so we're going to have different catalogs that are going to be built with different graphs of things that are wired together. And so Semver skip patch really kind of helped because we could build these catalogs without having all of this replaces logic nailed into the CSVs. Because you don't want to replace something that doesn't exist. You can't replace something that doesn't exist. I think maybe I need to write something down that describes their use case a little bit more detailed. See, essentially what we're doing is we're using the channel as the version, right? The version that the customer pins to. And we're just using the automatic Z-build feature of that to make sure they just get the latest within that scope of that channel. But we want them to be able to move up versions, major or minor versions, freely within the scope of that context. And so we need multiple catalogs depending on that. And so all right, let's table this for the time being.
I have two thoughts. The first one is that I think this is a good example of like some of the complexity that we are trying to get away from in our declarative index config enhancement, which is something that we're going to work on for 4.8. Not that it helps you right away, but basically what it does is it enables sort of the catalog power user to manipulate the index freely, because essentially one of the issues we have is we're trying to build everything for OPM for everyone, for the pipeline users, for upstream community members, for everyone, and then there's just a lot of complexity that hits edge cases. So at a high level, hopefully that feature, once we get it in, we're hopefully next few months.
Yeah, I'm reviewing that feature too. I haven't reviewed it much yet, but I intend to. And yeah, I think that might end up solving a whole bunch of problems, but I'm concerned it might create a bunch of new ones. So I'll let's table this because you're right. I need to look at that because that might actually be the right vehicle to get something like this in.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is I think it would be really valuable for you to sort of like maybe write up a doc that sort of describes the specific kind of support statements you want and what you're imagining the graphs to look like. I think that there's a way to just use replaces mode in a really specific way to get what you're looking for. And I think that there are some teams like in the internal Red Hat groups and also like some of ISVs that are partners with Red Hat that sort of do, I think, something very similar to what you're just describing. And they basically use the skip range field and don't set replaces, which allows them to describe these sort of like minor version channels. And you just always pick up the latest thing to prevent yourself from like, it's basically like you're always on the latest Z stream of a specific minor version.
No, yeah, that's
Um,
essentially what we're doing. We're using replaces and skip range in combination. Right, so we use replaces only within a channel to make sure that the old channel or the old bundle versions are still installable for certain use cases, just to make sure they hang around. And we use skip range to be able to just always move to the latest head of each channel. And then we typically allow edges from multiple lower minor versions to go to the most recent ones. We actually have, you can flip like 1.0 to 2.0 or 1.0 to 1.1. Because our skip range is large enough to be able to compensate for that. So maybe we already have what we need. I was mostly concerned about, because we are using replaces, if we wanted to start using being able to deprecate older versions, so removing them from the graph. Now it's hard to do that because we can't remove something. We can't rebuild the tree, rebuild the graph without having all of those previous versions there. So maybe we need something hybrid. I don't know. Yeah, as you said, I'll think about this some more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and feel free to reach out if you have some thoughts or need help or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, great. I mean, I just had one comment on this structure. It seems like basically the idea is to be able to move between channels. As you said, onto the latest Z stream, like from 1.0 to 1.1. But doesn't the subscription, wouldn't it reference the channel explicitly? Or I guess if it doesn't, it'll just go to the default channel. I'm just wondering if the user declares that I want to be on 1.0 and you kind of bump them to 1.1 at some point, is that?
I think the intention,
unexpected?
I think the intention is a user wants to be on 1.0. So they subscribe to the 1.0 channel. They get the latest Z of 1.0.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, oh, okay, I'm actually upgrading to a new version of Cube. That 1.0 version of my operator doesn't work anymore. So I modify my channel to 1.1. I want to be able to automatically upgrade from the latest Z of 1.0 to the latest Z of 1.1. I think that's usually the use case here.
Yes, that's about right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if we talked about this before, but have we talked about just having the Simver mode and the Simver skip patch mode hydrate graph connections across all channels instead of just the channel you're adding to? It seems like that might be the thing most people expect anyway, and that would give you, I think, the cross-channel updates we're looking for free. Does that make sense?
Sorry. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was sort of alluding to a couple of minutes ago. I'm just concerned that we can do that. It's only gonna give you certain use cases, right? Like this makes a lot of sense in a world where everybody's channels are minor Z stream release channels. It doesn't make as much sense if you're using channels in some other way, right? Like if you have a beta and a stable channel. And I think we can certainly add rules like this and say, like, here's the thing you should be doing with channels. But as soon as we do that, I think we might be inadvertently breaking somebody else who's doing something totally different. And I just wonder if trying to do this explicitly in Simver mode doesn't necessarily make sense. Or maybe there is some sort of middle ground we can find where we have some really specific rules about what extra edges get added in addition to the inter-channel relationships. I like I said, I'd be interested to see what that proposal would look like, but I think we want to be careful here to make sure that whatever we do doesn't lose that, like, this is supposed to be dead simple, doesn't provide you a lot of features mode.
Yeah, that's fair, but it sounds, I mean, the way I'm approaching this is none of the Red Hat pipelines use this, and then we now have upstream users who can't use it the way they want. So maybe we should just make that the thing.
That's fair.
I don't know if we're breaking anyone by changing this. Basically, it doesn't sound like too many folks have even tried to use it yet.
So I think this was a great issue to discuss. Chris, you said you're gonna come
Yeah.
back and look at it some more. I've marked it as triaged in the sense that it's, we've kind of looked at it and labeled it as a feature. So if we're set on this one, we can try to move on to another issue.
I have a couple more.
Sure. Yeah. Is there anyone else on the call who has a specific issue? Just letting anyone who's interested participate. Okay. Seems like people are quiet. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and we can look at another issue in registry or OLM.
Yeah. So in operator lifecycle manager, I've got a few.
Okay.
So if you look for see 1588. So one of the things we're working on is air gap, right? So I know we've talked about air gap a little bit before, and we think it's more of a Red Hat interest rather than an upstream interest. But in order to make air gap work the right way, we need the ability to encompass not just, so for related images for all the operands, right? So when we're copying the operand from the public registry to the target registry, we need a label and the digest. So what we'd like to have is both of them describable inside the related images. Because if you just have the label, then you don't have the digest. If you just have the digest, now you don't know how to tag it when you bring it over.
Yeah, I just want to mention that this is definitely something that we are sort of as the Red Hat team, we're definitely interested in the air gap use. I'm actually working on a OC ADM catalog mirror bug right now, together with Evan. So the idea is to basically add some fields to the spec of the CSV with regards to related images. That's basically to support this use case?
Yeah, that's all I was doing. So like you have related images, and then you've got, I have an example where you just have those things all defined, right? You have the tag, the target tag that you want to copy it to, and then the digest of the from tag. So this is where you essentially do your Scopio copy, and then you have the destination tag set to whatever you wanted to set it to. Because if you don't use a tag, that means the tags become random. And that means also that a customer can't prune their registry, and it just ends up becoming a bottomless pit of images.
Oh, I didn't think that the tag would be. I thought the tag would be based on sort of the hash of the manifest layer or something like that, or is it totally non-deterministic?
Well, how does a customer, so the problem is if you don't have any tags that are tied to like versions of things, right? Then it's hard to build pruning logic that allows you to detag things. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's hard for the customer to
Right, then you basically have a storage leak because you have images that are retained forever.
I see, Evan, you left some feedback regarding OC, right? So this is this is from about a year ago.
Well, this is, yeah, this feature is doing the dynamic tagging thing, I believe. So it's not propagating a specific tag over, it's doing, I think this is where it's creating dynamic tags. I think Evan talked about that, yeah, last summer. So unfortunately, I think it's something that fundamentally needs to be added to the CSV in order to be able to make this work, because you don't know what the tagging structure should look like, because it might be in the customer's realm.
Yeah, I was looking at this, Chris, and the related images, as I can tell, guys, is not even defined in the spec. It's kind of free form. So I was able to slap a tag in there. You know, there's no validation or anything at the CSV.
Oh, it's not
Actually,
it's not part of the kube
well,
structures and stuff, right?
There's two structures. You know, one is basically fairly well typed, and the other one is freeform, right? Depending on where you get it from.
Yeah, it's not defined in the on cluster CRD. That data gets stripped and stored in the index. That's all weird UX things that should be solved with the declarative config instead. I guess I think this one issue is touching a bunch of different things. I think we can, I don't know, if we're just looking at GCing stuff, and the goal is I want to be able to GC images that are no longer needed by the current catalog. I think we can do that just by looking at all the images for whatever the latest version of the catalog is, probably also all of the images that are currently in use in the cluster, and then pruning anything that's not one of those two. Like even if you have a version tag, right? Or do you expect a user to go look at each operator individually and decide this one currently on the cluster is now V2 plus only, so I can clear out all the less than V2? Because even that sounds like I'm not sure that the readability part helps with the GCing, if that makes sense.
I guess I don't know what the best practice customers are using for garbage collecting things other than untagging things, right? I think it's a real kind of loose, I mean, I don't think it's part of a spec at all and how cleanup happens in registries. So I guess I was going at it from a principle statement, saying if we had the tags, at least it allows you to propagate them forward, and then we can worry about how we're going to actually use those later. Because I know the registries now allow dual lookup, so you can actually put the SHA on the pull request on the image reference and the tag, and then the tag is essentially ignored in the pull. For most registries, some registries don't support it. But from a push perspective, that's not used. I know. I was just going from a principle. I didn't try to solve the whole air gap thing. I think it needs another discussion. And then James talked about the discoverability problem. So if we have tags that are specific to operator catalogs, that means we're going to need a bunch of tooling that's going to be able to do delta checking and all this pruning kinds of stuff. And then you're going to have to come up with tooling that describes tags that are no longer in use. And then you're going to have to feed that to, because I don't think you can, it's really hard to detag things.
I'll just comment. I just comment that OpenShift, like mirroring in OpenShift, is generally digest based, and I don't think I believe we don't support in OCADM catalog mirror, like mirroring tag based images. And so you're saying we can have both the digest and the tag in the name of the image. I just want to point out that, like, as you said, like there's additional tooling to build out with tagging, and I think that based on the overall OpenShift policy around like images and stuff, like OpenShift doesn't really like tag based things versus using digests. And yeah.
Or one thing I'll say is that when you do the mirroring, and this is OC specific, but when you do the mirroring, you can mirror everything into like a single namespace in the target registry. So you can version the entire set of catalog images together and decide when you're no longer using a particular catalog, you could just delete the entire namespace if you wanted to. But part of the problem with discussing this on the upstream side is that I don't think we have any mechanism in upstream Kubernetes, in basically non-OpenShift Kubernetes, to do the mirror rewrites that we do with the image content source policy on OpenShift. At least I'm not aware of any project that attempts to replicate that. And like Dan said, it is all digest based. So we have to have the digest references for that purpose.
So, I mean, that's kind of where I was coming from. If we at least had the way to provide additional metadata, like Joe was saying that, well, we can, it's just nobody uses it. But at least we could put it on there and decorate it so people knew what the intent was of that image. Because
It just seems like pruning. I mean, wouldn't this, like we talked about being able to prune things. I mean, how would we know? We got to have some way to know what, I mean, wouldn't this help in that scenario?
Well, you have this, what Evan was saying is we have the CSVs, right? So we know the versions of the CSVs. The CSVs have all the digests in it. So in theory, we can do it that way, right? Do a delta between CSV to CSV and figure out which is the non-intersecting list of images, and then figure out what those digests are and somehow figure out what the tags are for those things and untag them, I guess. I'm not exactly sure how you do deleting of images and registries without having a tag. Because you can't really go one direction. It's really hard to go one direction. You can discover the image, the digest attached to a tag, but it's hard to go the other way around.
Yeah, all of that stuff is definitely registry implementation specific. But one of the things that, like I said, could help a lot is if you just mirror everything into a target namespace. So you have like V1 of your catalog, mirror that into V1 catalog namespace. Every single image gets prefixed with V1 catalog. And so when you are done with that catalog, when you're on V5 catalog, you can just go to your V1 catalog namespace, delete the whole thing. That doesn't necessarily delete the backing content in registries, but it will untag all the content reference there, and then then it's up to the GC policy for that particular registry.
Yeah, the challenge there then is you have to start messing with the image content source policy to remap the paths, because all the image references.
But OC ADM catalog mirror does that already. It does all of that. So if you mirror like QueIO, CoreOS, etcd, v1.2, like we're looking at right now, and you mirror that into like target registry / my / namespace, that gets mirrored as my / namespace / CoreOS - etcd.
No, I know what you're saying. The problem is we've got it's really, really complicated, because we've got our own catalog with lots of products in there. So it depends on which product they're mirroring and what version. So it has to be kind of a runtime decision. So the problem is the OC ADM catalog mirror only mirrors entire catalogs, right? So today we would have to prune the catalog, put all the individual things in there, carve out what the version is. So I guess we just need to figure out, and this is what we're working on internally. We're trying to figure out how we can use prune and RM to build dynamic catalogs or curated catalogs for things that customers want.
Chris, so you are aware of the fact that you could also mirror it to a file and then do the sort of pruning and stuff just on the file system?
Yeah, I couldn't make that work, so I haven't looked at that closely yet.
Okay. Yeah, there's definitely some known bugs around that. Actually, that's what I'm working on right now. But that might be a nicer approach, because basically when you mirror to the file system, you get all the content and you get the mapping.txt, which is, as Evan said, like the image content sort of like, and it's much more transparent to the sort of the catalog maintainer or the mirrorer, what is going where. So that might be something, an approach to look into. And then, yeah, there's definitely a bug or two in there, but we're working on that. So hopefully that'll
just
help.
FYI, we're standing up just a local Docker registry, and we're just mirroring it to the local Docker registry. And we're just taking the file system from that and reconstituting it elsewhere. So we're kind of doing what you're doing, but we're cheating. So.
So with the separate namespaces, a lot of times we're just updating a single patch or something like that. So most of the images are exactly the same. Concern is that if we put them in separate namespaces, will we have more than one copy of that stuff, or I don't know, maybe I'm
You
just
won't. The registry is smart enough to, when you
okay.
actually register, when you actually refer to images by digest, the image namespace isn't actually included. It doesn't have to be included in that. So they're actually, they do reference counts and stuff on the file system to make sure that you're not duplicating it. So it's actually just retagging the same image. All right, so this is a really complicated topic, I guess. I was hoping that it was just a simple thing where we could add a tag, and but of course the tooling would have to be able to honor that and look at it.
Yeah, I think it's a complex issue. It's not really an OLM issue per se. It's just an issue with the complexity around mirroring and mirroring operator content, but mirroring things in general. As you said, there's not really like a.
But I guess I don't see any drawback to having a tag capability in there. I mean, can we add our own tags to the related images? I mean, our own fields, is that okay, or should we not do that?
So
That
you
it really
can,
helps us, but
right.
At the
you
moment,
can
isn't
add-
related images an array, not a map? I thought.
You can add additional fields, just like we're showing here. You can put a tag in there today. It's not structured.
yeah, it's not a, I don't think it's an array of strings.
So we think it's a
Right.
map. Okay.
You can add the tag data, but it won't get persisted in the index. And when you use OC-ADM catalog mirror to mirror, it's still going to generate its own tags. You can use the tag data to go back and double tag stuff with the user readable tags like 1, 2, 3. But then if you use that to make pruning decisions, you go delete the 1, 2, 3 tag. That image is still going to be tagged with the generated digest tag from the mirror step. So it won't actually GC the backing image. So it's, is that worth it for your use case? I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. We have 9 minutes left to have another one. Nobody else has one.
Well, I'm wondering, I guess I can't find the issue, Chris, but this whole, we've talked about switching catalogs. And
Good one.
is there,
So okay, there's the switching
but I know there's
catalogs
a ticket
one.
out there.
There's a switching catalogs one, and then there's the dynamic switching catalogs, and there's also adding PSPs or SECs to the CSV. That's another important one. I think yours is more imminent.
Is this the one 1768?
Yeah, you can, this is the one. So what we're struggling, yeah, so. So we're, like Chris said, we have our own catalog build pipeline and delivery. So we're struggling with, how do we make sure that the catalog we delivered, if across OCP versions. I mean, today we only have one, but we think we need to have more than one. But if we need to have more than one, how do we dynamically decide and switch between these catalogs within the cluster? So we are looking at, what's the right way to do that? And I think at one time there was talk about, is there some way to add in like to, a catalog source or some kind of plugin thing where you can add additional logic that says, oh, I am I was running on 4.6. I've been upgraded to 4.7. I need to make sure I'm running with the 4.7 catalog versus the 4.6. And then also the use case around tooling for, cluster admin people. How do they know what the implications are of moving to a new catalog? So I can envision, enterprise customers saying, oh, I just can't run with latest here. I need to know if I plug in this catalog, what operators disappear, what bundles are added that would cause things to be updated automatically. I just think there's a lot of different use cases floating around here, but I'm just wondering, are you guys looking at any of this kind of stuff?
I think at
Does
one
this
point
make
we
sense
had,
to you?
yeah, I think it makes sense. And I think we already talked about this in a story in the OLM backlog, where we wanted to have the ability to use a limited set of variables for resolving catalog image pullbacks, so that you could, for instance, inject the OpenShift major or minor version into a image string or image UI. So the catalog reference would sort of be dynamic in this case. So when you update the cluster, the reference would change automatically because it's resolved by OLM with those variables in mind. And that would kind of automatically switch the catalog once you update the cluster. I think that use case we already discussed, and we put it in the backlog, but we didn't really get to it yet.
Yeah, I think the important thing is Joe's actually working on a prototype of this, and we just want to make sure that we're not wasting our time. Because I think Joe, I think what you're going to do is you're kind of coming up with all those use cases. You're coming up with some Golang command line mechanisms to do that, and I think the next step would be to demo that, some of these use cases, and maybe entertain the idea of putting this inside one of the existing operators.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, I really think, this whole, if we can switch catalogs, Daniel, like you're saying, I guess if you can point us to where those where the spec is that kind of defines that, I think that might be helpful. But in the other whole set of use cases is this, how do I compare catalogs? And like Chris said, that's what I've been working on, and I'd be happy to kind of show you that. I want to compare catalogs. I want to look at the state of my cluster to inform a cluster admin of, potential problems with just applying a new catalog. I mean, that whole visibility kind of thing to me seems to be a bit of a hole in how cluster admin people are, really locking down and being able to determine the impacts of continually pulling latest or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some need for more more extensive tooling around like catalog management and sort of like the admin side of comparing catalogs. One note I had is that, so we do have sort of a mechanism in OLM for updating catalogs. You're probably aware of the catalog polling feature. That is the spec is called update strategy, the field, and then the one we have implemented is registry polling. But you could also say use case. We've thought about like, other more sophisticated way of updating catalogs. I mean, you're kind of talking about moving between different catalogs intentionally, but that's also just something else to consider, is that the API is named that way because we envision that there'd be multiple update strategies, and if you had like some kind of webhook or some kind of sophisticated way of figuring out where you want the catalog based image to be, that's another thing to think about. And it looks like well, go ahead. I was just saying we're just about out of time, but go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to digest that. So that might be a path to say, we could deliver a different update strategy that was smarter than just polling and pulling down the latest, right?
Yes, I think that would be that's sort of what we envisioned when we developed it this way. I think we would definitely be happy to. So I added the polling feature. So I'd definitely be happy to look at any kind of additional polling update strategy that you guys had in mind. That'd be good.
Can I ask just real quick on that? If we don't include that update strategy, then it never gets refreshed, right? There isn't some background thing that would always refresh the catalog.
No, that's right now. That's the only way of updating the content of the catalog on the cluster.
Okay, because I'm kicking around whether that should actually refer to a digest, and then there's a smart way to switch between images versus just tagged as latest or whatever. But
Right. No, yeah, it's certainly it's
no,
certainly
we're
an
out of time, but I mean, how would we like to, I mean, how would we want to proceed if we wanted to kind of look at an update strategy or, you know, collaborate on what the right way to do?
Yeah.
Fold in what Daniel mentioned, what you're talking about, and then add in the use case for helping a cluster admin know what he's going to do to his cluster. Yeah, that's the, like the CLI that I have today does those actions. So I actually have an OC catalog that does these commands that you're showing on the screen now.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to do it is that there's already this open issue. What we can do is we can kind of, if this is like a real need, we can kind of turn this into like a little sub project kind of, and like talk about it in the working group and kind of get this to a point where something big is delivered that would help this sort of catalog situation. That's what, in my opinion, we can just kind of keep tracking it via this issue and make progress incrementally.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. And with that, I think we're basically out of time for today. So thank you everyone for attending, and have a nice day, and we'll see you at the working group meeting next week. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.